and welcome back to the channel. I'm Muriel. In this video I will be doing my reading wrap up for the month of July and August, the bulk of the summer really, since I mostly devoted it to reading two different series, parts of the series, and was gone for basically the entirety of the month of August. I will start, however, with the non-fiction, because yes, I did technically read, or rather attempt to read, a bit of non-fiction these past 2 months. Though most of that was made up of a bunch of mental health self-help books, basically chiefly concerned with managing CPTSD, which I won't go into because A, I DNF'd most of them as they weren't useful to me, and B, I picked these up for self-therapy, not for, intellectual stimulation subject to critical analysis, so that's that. Still, I'll throw out 2 titles that, who knows, may be useful to others, these being the Complex PTSD Coping Skills Workbook by Tamara McClintock-Greenberg and Transforming the Living Legacy of Trauma Workbook by Janina Fisher. Both of these actually had useful things to impart, kernels of insight, though it was all ultimately still limited by the fact neurodivergent individuals were clearly not taken into account when these were put together. Which is fine, I didn't really expect that either. And then by the fact dissociation and all dissociative disorders weren't discussed nearly enough for my specific needs. I also read a book called The Mini ADHD Coach, written by Alice Gendron, principally to find something I could forward on to my partner, and I found it to be a very nice little introductory guide to living and dealing with ADHD. I really appreciated the fact each chapter was very succinct, but informative, and that the text was accompanied by useful little illustrations. It's also a rather short read overall, so I definitely, recommend it to adults newly diagnosed with ADHD, with or without accompanying ASD. And then I read a, let's call it, short collection of interrelated biographical essays devoted to the intersection of autistic and female experiences as analysed through a feminist lens, titled Letters to My Weird Sisters, written by Joanne Limburg. The book is indeed structured around letters the author chose to write to different women from history, including Virginia Woolf, she personally found relatable on the grounds of shared difference, weirdness, marginalization, etc. And I found this decently relatable myself and moving in places. It was certainly a relaxing and quietly thought-provoking read, which I rated with a respectable 7 out of 10, so consider it a soft recommendation for readers interested in the general topic of autism or neurodivergence more broadly in women. Finally, for this section, I simply must also mention what has so far been one of the best things I have read, or at least consumed with my eyes this year. The absolutely fucking gorgeous art book that is Soul Arts. This is quite heavy. Which was put together and curated by Michael Samuels, better known as Vati Vidya to all my Soulsborne peeps. And of course in collaboration with a shit ton of incredibly talented artists. Absolutely fucking gorgeous, like I said, and that's all that really needs to be said here, but I'll add that this made me feel revitalized as an artist, and as far as I'm concerned, if an art book inspires me to create my own art this hard, it's doing everything right. And even if you're not yourself an artist, please, please, please consider treating yourself to this beauty if you're any sort of Soulsborne and graphic arts fan. It is well worth it. Yes, it's decently pricey, but I mean, this is a deluxe art book. It's worth the price I paid for it, most definitely. Additionally, I really appreciated the fact Mr. Samuels made sure to design the book in such a way as to have descriptive text take as little physical space as possible and thus give pride of glorious place to the actual art. That was an intelligent design choice. Thank you. And so yes, this was straight up a 10 out of 10, no question, although you know what? Yeah, actually fuck it, it was an 11 out of 10. It was that good. Moving on to the fiction now, which shouldn't take too long, ultimately, because I essentially attempted to read part of a fantasy series in July and read another in its entirety in what was left of July, August, and technically the first week of September. That first part of the series, of course, refers to my abysmally, one could even say epically, given it is epic fantasy, failed attempt to get into Stephen Erikson's Malazan Book of the Fallen series. Now, Malazan was just clearly not meant for me. at this time in my life at any rate. I've also realized I'm still pretty damn tired because of mental health things and what has so far amounted to a pretty mediocre reading year, unfortunately. So given the fact I made a reading vlog covering my attempt at Malazan, and the fact said reading vlog includes a review of the material I actually managed to read, I'm not going to spend much time here going over my thoughts about the beginning of the series again. In fact, I'm just going to rapid list my main positives and negatives. Starting with the former, I enjoyed bits of the world building. Yes, especially where the world's mythology and theology were concerned. Gardens of the Moon featured a giant, magical, and old as fuck female raven character named Crone. Hashtag immeasurably based. Enough said, I'll give Malazan that. And I guess I felt some respect for the sheer scope and scale that Malazan seemed to want to play with on a world-building and presumably theming level. I didn't find said scope and scale particularly well executed or convincing for my brain in what I read, mind you, but still, I can and do respect the attempt, or perceived attempt, at any rate. And then the negatives, I didn't care about the characters, nor about most of the plot. The narrative distance or scale in terms of things like fictional history versus fictional lived story didn't work for me. There was an issue with doing too many things at once and conflating complexity with effective and meaningful depth in terms of world building. Again, for me. And there's just nothing for it. Significant parts of the material I read felt too RPG video gamey for my personal tastes as a reader, because yes, I'm a gamer as well, a casual gamer, but what works for a video game doesn't clearly necessarily work for a novel. So as a reminder, I read the entirety of Gardens of the Moon and a little over a third of Dead House Gates, and rated that somewhere between a 5 and a 6 out of 10. And yeah, I'm afraid that's just nowhere good enough for me to continue with a series made up of 10 chunky as fuck volumes. Let me tell you, the burnout, on a few different levels, has been pretty bad this year. I've also needed to get good at DNFing for a long time, and so it seems Malazan was where I started my journey to recovery. And to reiterate, if you want more detailed thoughts, I'll redirect you to my reading vlog, and of course, you can't just watch the review at the end of it. The other series I read, completely this time, or rather reread completely, was Harry Potter, written by, of course, J.K. Rowling, and it was an enjoyable experience overall. I had a good time revisiting these. It basically went exactly as I expected, interestingly enough, although there were also a couple surprises here and there as well. I mixed text reading with audiobook listening, especially since I travel in August. I went to Worldcon in Glasgow, rest assured it was, yes, awesome. Then went to Ireland, so I was quite busy, and yes, Stephen Fry's narration is a delight. And I do actually have a few thoughts about this series as a whole, so I have decided I will in fact go ahead and do a review for this one, which should get done soon-ish. Assuming I haven't just jinxed myself by actually saying it out loud. Still, as with Malazan, I'll just list a few thoughts here already. Regardless of anything else about her as a person, which I'm not interested in discussing here at all, just so we're clear, and will not be interested in discussing when I upload my review either, just so we're on the same page with that. I think Rowling wrote a good and impactful story in these books. I think Harry Potter is a good work of storytelling overall, especially given the series is fundamentally meant for children. And then, okay, teenagers with the later books, but not primarily meant for adults. I say this because I am one of those adults who would rather read books meant for adults. That's just who I am. For me, Harry Potter, as a story and a magical world, shone the most when it leaned into its whimsical nature. There was a lot of charm, silliness, and coziness in the story, and I think it's one of its best qualities. I was more interested in the series' adult characters this time around, and didn't actually care all that much about the triumphant trio of Harry, Ron, or even Hermione, actually. Luna, however, was still based, but there wasn't nearly enough of her. Hagrid, however, emerged as my bestest boy, and I still love the magical creatures, because obviously. I had my issues with the finer print, shall we say, of the world building, aspects of plot, pacing, and character psychology, but a lot of these can simply be filed under these books were originally written for children, so duh, in a way. I wasn't a fan of the whole, we have a schoolhouse where the evil kids go thing. I mean, technically that's not entirely true, but it reads that way too heavily. Some baddies were also a little too cartoonishly evil for my adult taste, though no, I'm not actually thinking of Voldemort or umbrage with this, but more in the actual review. The whole, we're going to add Horcruxes? Okay, but then we're also going to add the Deathly Hallows thing. It just about worked, but it wasn't the smoothest thing either. Harry as the Chosen One was a little cringe. The prophecy shtick around him mostly worked. I found it decently clever, but then Harry does end up being kind of overrated by some of the adults around him in a way that doesn't really feel justified through love alone, if that makes sense. Speaking of love, however, I really like the fact love, friendship, loyalty was such a strong leitmotif, or theme, even, in Harry Potter. In fact, it's one of the only true themes of the story, really. And love in the broad sense, too. Automatic point for that. It may seem a bit corny or simplistic to some, but I actually think it's really positive, especially for a story, once again, aimed at developing humans. Finally, I still preferred the later books, and still thoroughly disliked the series' epilogue. If anything, I found it an even greater false note than I did when I first finished the series as a young teenager. So I'll leave it at that for now, and just add that for me, as an adult, Harry Potter as a whole sits somewhere between a 7 and a very soft tentative 7.5 out of 10 in terms of rating. I don't know that I'll ever reread these books, I really don't, but I would still say that they are special, and certainly retain a special place in my reading history. Now I'll go over and share a few thoughts about some of the stuff I watched, be it movies or TV shows, over the summer, or did with my partner. I'll start with Amazon Prime's The Boys, yes, that one, as my boyfriend and I are now caught up with it. We both, so far, thoroughly enjoy the show, and its thorough thematic examination of, well, capitalism plus social media plus disinformation plus celebrity culture equals evil clusterfuck. Via superheroes. To oversimplify, of course. But we also both agree it does veer into gratuitousness at times when it comes to sexually graphic and graphically violent content. I understand the comic series this is based on is even more edgy than the show, and that it conversely lacks its thematic depth. So thank the gods for small mercies there, but for my part, I'm kind of like, we get it. They're all, or near enough to it, perverted and corrupt degenerates and psychos. Can we move on? Just a little, please. I'm also glad the series will end soon, because it does feel like it has run its natural course, story and theming-wise. And as to rating, I'll wait until the series is finished to give my final rating, but for now, I guess it sits at, 8 out of 10. The theming is very good. The show is also hilarious. Like, laugh out loud hilarious in places, but it is gratuitous at times, even for me, and it does need to end. So, I guess we'll see. We also watched, or rewatched, for my partner, all of Gravity Falls, which is a really neat animated series, it's just 2 seasons, about a pair of male-female twins called Dipper and Mabel, who are sent to their great-uncle Stan in Gravity Falls, in Oregon, I believe. I really hope I didn't get that wrong. To spend the summer. Stan runs a mystery shack as a charlatan, basically, but it turns out actual weird, seemingly supernatural things do happen in Gravity Falls, ... And I really enjoyed it. I found the characters endearing, for one thing. Also, shout out to Waddles the Pig. Love the spoopy, supernatural and sci-fi things, the mystery vibes, if you will, and the, at times, silly, wacky tone, which reminded me of things like Supernatural a little, if Supernatural was meant for younger viewers. Courage the Cowardly Dog a bit, I loved that cartoon as a child. And yeah, just other things in that general vein. And I really wish I'd been able to see this one as a teenager, or a child, younger teenager. Honestly, because I would have loved it. And if I had to slap a rating on it, yeah, I guess I'd go with an 8 to 8.5 out of 10, actually. My partner and I also watched the 2nd season of House of the Dragon. Now, he has not yet read Fire and Blood. I obviously have, though I could do with a reread. And we both enjoyed it. But I also had a couple of quibbles, shall we say? I still very much hate, with a passion, anytime the show references the prophecy of the Song of Ice and Fire and tries to forcefully tie itself back to Game of Thrones. It feels like nails on a chalkboard to me, because the callback, let's reference shit for the fans nature of these bits is so goddamn obvious, it makes me want to scream. The way it's all being developed through the relationship between Damon and this show-only character named Alice is also brushing against my alarm buttons a smidge. Additionally, I wasn't a fan of the ending scene of the season. That ponderous succession of serious and somber character shots with the grandiose raw music in the background. It all once again felt a bit too forced. It felt like the show was just picking me up, shaking me like a sack of potatoes and going, "We want you to feel the epic feels. Do you feel them now?" And it's like, mate, calm the fuck down. This isn't remotely organic. Stop it. On a funnier note, I've also since then read that, archived, rather salty blog post penned by none other than good old G.R.R. Martin himself, whom, as an FYI, I also saw in person at WellCon. That's right, I did. I stood, about 2 meters away from him? That was cool. Anyway, so yeah, I read that blog post, and let's just say, I'm a little concerned now for the future of the show. Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. For the shits and giggles of it, my partner and I watched the Borderlands movie. Now, before this past month of August, I had never played a Borderlands game, or any FPS for that matter, but then played some Borderlands 2 with my boyfriend on his old PS3, and it was loads of fun. Especially once I actually got somewhat good at it. Much shooty in any case, yay. But so he wanted to watch the movie, fully expecting it to be bad, and indeed, I can confirm it was hot garbage. Like seriously, very bad movie. Everything was too clean, all looked fake, all the emotions felt forced, it was just a throwaway plot, too many throwaway characters, Kate Blanchett, great actress, but she had no business being in that role in that movie. What the actual fuck? No, seriously, it was so weird. In a bad way. The humor was juvenile, and I wanted to murder that claptrap so bad. I mean, he's annoying as fuck in the game, right? But he's so much worse in that movie. So this was a do not recommend unless you are thoroughly drunk or high, and even then, out of 10 for me. We also finally watched Dune Part 2, and, well, I won't go into any real detail here. I'm also not going to do a review of it, because whilst I liked Dune Part 2 and thought it was a good movie, I was also ultimately, sadly, disappointed by it. And my appreciation of this adaptation of the novel Dune has now lessened, and I no longer feel confident saying this is the equivalent of The Lord of the Rings for science fiction, or rather science fantasy, I guess. Because at the end of the day, I do think too many corners were perhaps not cut as such, but smoothed down in terms of the story's theming and world building, which are the two aspects of Dune I love the most, because, well, I think they're freaking excellent, or, I mean, the theming, at least, specifically, is excellent. I hate to say this, but I do feel like the theming and deeper story of Dune were dumbed down a bit for a greater audience, and then made more overt in places. Yes, I am chiefly thinking of, well, Paul as Messiah, and, the, misleading nature of that, and Chani being against all of that, actually. So that is a reversal of her role in the book, right? Though, I guess the change to her character didn't bug me that much either, because I never really cared for her as a character, and I never bought into her romance with Paul in any case, so whatever. But so yes, precious things were lost in translation, as it were, and I think a lot of my issues come down to the fact, it seemed to me, like too much was sacrificed in terms of deeper plot, lore, and theming that could have been conveyed through dialogue or quieter scenes in service of visual spectacle and thus simplified visual storytelling. The way the book was divided for the movies probably impacted the pacing negatively as well. Either way, I think Dune, the novel by Frank Herbert, deserved more than that. Better than that. I also wasn't a fan of what the movie did to Aaliyah's character, more specifically, though I suppose her arc could ultimately be salvaged in Dune Part 3, which will adapt Dune Messiah, as I understand it. And given that, I shall retain a measure of hope things can still be turned around in terms of thematic and greater storytelling depth. But, you know, I also won't hold my breath, because I've been hurt too many times with this kind of stuff. Finally, my boyfriend and I watched the first 3 episodes of the 2nd season of Rings of Power. Entirely his fault, by the way, just want to make that clear. And also, since then, he's watched episodes 4 and 5. I have not, because it is very much still garbage. Trust me, I really tried to go into it with an open mind. Like, I gave myself a stern talk before I sat down to watch this. Thankfully cuddled up with my boyfriend, because I really needed that. But the fact is, I'm no like at all. In fact, and I'm an idiot for this, I'm very much aware of that, I managed to get mad again watching this barely counts as fanfic. Because you know what, if you think about it, people who write fanfic usually love the stuff they write fanfic about. And I don't know about you, but I'm not feeling the love in this thing at all. On a slightly more coherent note, so the lore that was butchered in season 1 very much stayed butchered, and then bitches managed to butcher additional bits of lore, because why not? Gally, dear old Gally, remains perpetually bitchy and pissed off. We got an abysmally boring bit of backstory for fuckboy Sauron, formerly known as Halbro, and learned that he used to be a pile of gooey eldritch spaghetti. He then becomes Anatar, finally, and Celebrimbo is clearly the biggest Muppet of all time, and I just don't understand why they did the fake identity, oh, we don't know who this is, oh, he's a magical smith thing, twice? Okay. Pelagia and the Grey Havens are small, quaint fishing hamlets, and not major port cities, because why make anything feel real and grandiose and epic, like in the actual fucking Legendarium, when you can just have discount everything? Politics in Numenor remain the Turker Gerbs level stupid and nonsensical, and one of Manway's eagles shows up in a way that made 0 sense from a source lore or in-show lore perspective, so congrats on that one. Orcs remain the oppressed minority du jour, because ham-fistedly shoving an allegory for 21st century social justice commentary is always fun, apparently. And then they also have nuclear families now. Yay! Randolph traipses in the desert with Femdo and Femwise, our friendly discount Irish half-eat, then yeets them into the atmosphere when his magic goes wrong. We also see some Runions, that's what I'm gonna call them, and maybe rebate Saruman? At any rate, he's the dude leading the Mothy White Nazgals from season 1, so they didn't die. Good for them. We did get to meet Círdan. He was acceptable, I'll say that. He has mentor-type chats with Hesprey and Elrond. Yite. We spent some time with the dwarves. They're still, I mean, based on the first 3 episodes I saw, my least loathed bit. Though I've learned since then that it does actually get worse, so rip, I guess. Still, I'm actually going to give a point of praise to Amazon here for doing the bare fucking minimum, mind you, but still, because I saw some beard hairs on the female dwarves. Huzzah! I also still like the bits of singing I got, because once again, it's like one of the only things that feels Legendarium congruent in this thing. Oh, and yeah, Isildur is still alive, because of course he fucking is. No one of importance died in that pyroclastic flow. There are no stakes in this show. QE, please kill me now, D. His horse finds him? Oh, how sweet. And we get some spooters. Because gotta hit those callback checklist items, am I right? Oh, so Bronwyn's dead. She big dead. Because the actress left the show. Good for her. But it just kind of drives the point home that her romance with Aronde was absolutely fucking pointless. Theo's still bopping about, though. There's a thing where Isildur meets a woman, then gets ambushed by Darkside people, then the woman meets up with Theo and Pelagia, and stuff sort of happens, but also no one cares? See, to my boyfriend's point, it's one thing to have the show be stupid, oh yeah, lore raping, etc., but to have it be boring, unremittingly boring on top of that, that's the unforgivable crime. But yeah, we just couldn't believe we'd watched 3 fucking hours of television, because next to nothing happened. It feels like the show is just fidget spinning through plot threads. It never takes the time to properly sit with and develop any one of them in any meaningful, much less interesting fashion. I'll say this though, he and I both laughed at the abject stupidity of asking one's lord whether or not to let a dude into the city when he's already been led into it. No, seriously, at one point, this one elf woman asks Celebrimbo whether they should let fuckboy Sauron into Eregion. But bro's already through the freaking gate. So we were both like, but you've already let him in! We just both cackled. That was just, what was that? So like I said, I haven't watched episode 4 or 5 at this point. My boyfriend has. I do know, and I mean, he's brought me up to speed, but I know that Tommy V shows up. Yite, I guess. What the fuck is he doing in Rune? Don't ask. I just can't. I can't with this shit. I mean, I might watch the rest of it just to, like, meme about it with my boyfriend. And if he insists on it, I don't know. If I do, though, I'll go into it kicking and screaming. Because it's shite, though. And no, I'm sorry, I will not be reviewing each episode like I did with season 1. No, I can't do it. I know I have a history of being a tad masochistic with this kind of shit, but I have my limits. I must have my limits, so no. And yeah, final words, fuck this show. Just fuck this show. And that will be all for this reading wrap-up. I hope you all had a good summer, reading and everything else-wise. I hope your autumn's reading is looking good as well. As to my experience at Worldcon, it was amazing. I definitely want to go to more book-centric, SFF book-centric conventions in the future. Oh yes. It was just a great experience. I ended up deciding not to do a vlog because I also just wanted to enjoy myself, and I was with my partner as well, so that's that. I did take a lot of photos. A lot of them haven't posted on my Instagram page. There should be a link for it on my YouTube page, but I'll drop a link to it in the description box down below as well if you're curious. Just a few quick highlights. Like I said, we ran into George R. R. Martin in the dealer's hall. It was just like taking a stroll and looking at stuff and talking with people, and yeah, like 2 meters away from him. And I complimented one of his assistant's tattoos because it was a supernatural tattoo, so yay. We sat on a panel with Nadia Korafor and Adrian Tchaikovsky, and I spoke with Adrian Tchaikovsky right after. I also asked a question on the panel, and I will attach a little a video snippet of me asking that question, because why not? So that was very cool. It was a panel about creepy crawlies in space, bugs, and all that stuff. So yeah, obviously Adrian Tchaikovsky was going to be on that one. Then I chatted with him a little bit afterwards, and I got him to sign not a book. No, I got him to sign a picture of a jumping spider. So I'm sorry, but that's cool. Fight me. So I'm very happy I have that. It will be framed at some point in the future. And then we went to paddles about dragons, about religion in science fiction and fantasy, about revolutions in speculative fiction, about using ancient cultures for your world building. We went to a thing called SFF Limericks in real time. That was a lot of fun. We also went to 2 concerts, which were amazing. Love the concerts. Bought a few things. I won't do a book haul here, but so, yes, I brought back books, obviously. And no, just great experience. Oh yes, and so many ribbons on the convention badges. Didn't know that was a thing, ribbon cultures at conventions. Saw Ada Palmer on a couple panels as well, so I might actually pick up Terra Ignota next year. Great experience. Hope to repeat in the future, most definitely. Hopefully the Dublin gets the 2029 bid. That would be awesome. So on those final words, I hope you'll have a lovely day, evening, or whichever time of day you prefer. As usual, please do take good care of yourselves, and thank you for the continued support. And I shall see you all reasonably soon for the Harry Potter series review, but until then, bye-bye.
Thank you. So, I mean, you covered the role of bugs, creepy crawlies, as symbols, representatives of things that disgust us, the alien, maybe even people who are marginalized or just very different. So thinking about that, I know that the title of this panel is Creepy Crawlies in Space and Bugs, and thinking more about things like arthropods, spiders, insects. But then we also kind of covered octopuses, so cephalopods, and I mean, science fiction and cosmic horror specifically is riddled with tentacles. But then I was thinking, then could we, it's a bit of a cheeky question, but could we then enlarge this category to even some vertebrates? Because I was thinking rats kind of fulfill this same role, because I think it was Mr. Tchaikovsky who said spiders are the most reviled things for a lot of people, but rats also elicit this very visceral reaction from a lot of human beings. I mean, I think they're very cute. I also think jumping spiders are cute, and a lot of people don't. So in that sense, then could some even vertebrates or mammals be honorary bugs in a storytelling and thematic sense?
I mean, my brother sent me a meme the other day that was basically like, you know, you get to the galaxy brain bit and it's everything is bugs, and I kind of agree with that.
I think yes, rats, and I think also snakes. There are a number of vertebrates that have that are kind of culturally coded as bad guys, basically, and have extremely bad press because of it.
Yeah. I think that's the category vermin, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everything, including the. Yeah.
But I think it's fascinating because, like, if you look at the animals that really disgust us, like things like rats and pigeons and possums, raccoons, all the animals that live with us and off us. Like, they're probably the only ones who are going to be bothered when we go extinct. Like, all the other animals are just going to be breathed sighs of release. But the rats are going to go, oh man, I miss pizza.
Yeah,